What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hartness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Kimberly Weifling, and we speak about how to facilitate possibilities and breakthroughs, and what facilitation has to do with physics, and what we can learn from science. So stay tuned to dive in and be inspired. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
I'm thrilled to be here, Miriam. Thank you.
I am very intrigued by your profile and what you're bringing to the world, and cannot wait to learn from you and share with the audience. And I always like to start with a question: when did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
Yeah, I do consider myself a facilitator. I started really using that term when people started saying I was a trainer. And I'm sorry, I don't think the word trainer captures the fullness of what we do when we hold that space for people to come and transform themselves.
That is so powerful. Thank you. I haven't had that answer yet. 160 episodes.
Wow. I was stressing out that I would bring nothing new here, Miriam.
Do you remember when this moment was and when you understood the actual difference that you bring to the world by holding the space as a facilitator instead of a trainer?
Yeah, I started facilitating workshops on the side while I was still working full-time at my first big corporate job. I worked at Hewlett-Packard as I was a repairman, one of the first female repairmen in the analytical products group. And then I was in manufacturing engineering and I was in R&D, product development, all these engineering jobs. And I went to a workshop that opened my eyes to how I wanted to create possibilities. And this amazing woman, Barbara Fittipaldi, challenged me to show up and transform the planet for the better. So I started doing this little creating a vision of your future, I called it, a collage workshop where we would get together and make a collage and hallucinate about our fabulous futures. Sometimes I add an extra F in front of fabulous future. And then share that possibility and map it backwards from there. And I started to see what happened there that had nothing to do with me teaching them anything. It was about them bringing the magic and letting this emerge in a place that was safe where they could enjoy it and get support. I realized it was way more than teaching or training.
And now it makes sense because as you describe it, it really comes from this engineer's perspective. So you craft an environment or a journey where they can then put the pieces together, add their own flavor, their own story to create something for themselves. It's like a do-it-yourself engineering.
It's kind of like that. I would even say it's more like, well, I'm a physicist by education. I have a master's degree in physics and a bachelor's degree in chemistry and physics, but don't worry, I have useful skills too. and it's more like creating a systems approach, like complex interdynamic systems that are going to co-conspire to make possible things. And then it's up to the participants to bring the magic that they need to benefit from that and help each other. It's not just each participant, like I'm sure you've seen it, that the magic comes together from different people bringing something and contributing it. And I can't take responsibility for all the wonderful things that happen in so-called my workshops.
And I wonder to what extent this reflects your physics mindset, as I imagine if you study physics more than chemistry, you need to embrace the fact that you don't understand. And maybe most probably you will never understand. So what have you learned and what can we learn from physics?
Well, the first thing I learned from physics was go for partial credit. It's really hard for me. It was a very tough challenge, and I never got any perfect score on any exam. And sometimes 40% score was passing. So, and sometimes I would work for days on one problem and finally finish it mostly. So I learned to tackle big, huge, impossible challenges and to keep going and go for partial credit and not expect that I would ever fully complete or understand anything. That was the first part. And the next part was complicated things that look complicated might not be complicated. They might be complex. And I give you the example that I just love is a flock of birds. There are these birds called starlings, thousands of them take off and fly together in these big, huge swarms. And they don't bump into each other and fall from the sky dead. They don't have these kinds of problems. They just effortlessly do it. There's no CEO bird. There's no bird organization chart. They don't have bird planning meetings and action items and owners and bird due dates. They have certain algorithms or guidelines for how they interact with the birds in front, behind, top, bottom, side to side. And then together, what emerges is something that could never come from just one bird.
Which sounds like nature in general.
Yes. Nature has perfected this self-organizing systems and the whole fractal nature of reality, chaos and complexity, hiding subtle order underneath of it. Yeah, it's totally not Newtonian. My form of physics that I embrace, it's not Newton's laws of motion.
It's quantum.
Yes. When I studied quantum mechanics, it's the first time I really thought, I do not understand this world. It really messed with my mind to study quantum physics and realize that reality, as Einstein said, is nothing more than an illusion, but it's a very powerful illusion.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't understand. I'm fascinated by physics, but I don't understand anything. But what I got from quantum physics is that things happen at the same time and that things are related, although they're not in direct communication.
I honestly feel it's quite possible that our entire reality is a giant quantum vacuum fluctuation that will vanish suddenly. And I can't really grab onto this world as so-called real, permanent, and even time is meaningless in a way because it changes depending on how fast you're traveling. And human brains, I don't think human brains who live day-to-day life are designed to understand that kind of physics. But if you're an atom or a subatomic particle, I'm sure it makes perfect sense.
Or it doesn't, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't need to make sense.
Well, and so there you go, because we can interpret the world in a way that serves us, knowing that that interpretation is not reality, but it serves us at that moment. And I think that's good enough, right? We don't have to be in touch with the fundamental reality. We just have to have an interpretation of reality that serves us at this moment for whatever our purpose is.
There are different layers that I would like to disentangle. Let's see whether I can hold on to them. One is, or the last thought was about attachment to a certain outcome. That's what I hear from what you explain when I translate it back to a group session or a workshop is, yes, there are things that happen. It might make sense or not, but how can we detach our own expectations and our illusion of reality and maybe open up our mind to different realities, different possibilities, and different perspectives maybe of the group?
Yes, there are some questions that I think are really helpful for doing that. For example, what's possible? What seems impossible, but if it were possible, would transform our lives, our team, our work, our organization, our world for the better? And what might make impossible possible? So those are really powerful questions. I first was inspired by Joel Barker with this many years ago. What's possible? What seems impossible? What might make impossible possible? And then the other thing, when so-called bad things happen, the perfect question that I love to ask is, what does this crap make possible that would never have been possible if things went right? I mean, let's not judge it in the moment. You cannot tell good luck from bad luck when it's happening. I don't know if you know the story of the Chinese horse farmer, but I would love to tell that at some point.
Yes, please tell it. And I think I recently just read it, and I loved it. Please tell it to the audience.
Well, I'm just starting to take a course on positive intelligence from Shirzad, this guy from Stanford University. And he tells the story in his audio book about positive intelligence. There's a farmer who has a horse, and he's considered quite wealthy in his little village. But one day the horse runs away. So all the neighbors say, oh, that's bad luck. And he says, perhaps. That the next day the horse comes back and 15 wild horses follow his horse, and he corrals all of them. Now he's got 16 horses. He's like incredibly rich. And the neighbors say, wow, what good luck. And he goes, perhaps. The next day his son is trying to tame one of these wild horses and gets thrown off, and his leg is badly injured. And the neighbors say, what bad luck? We'll see. The next day after that, the emperor's army comes through the village, taking all of the able-bodied men of his son's age to fight in a war. But his son can't go because his leg is injured. And the neighbors say, what good luck. And it goes on apparently for 500 verses, Miriam. Good luck, bad luck. You cannot tell good luck from bad luck when it's happening. And you might need to wait a few years and look back on it and see how this failure opened a doorway to a whole world of possibilities you would have never encountered otherwise.
Yeah, thank you for telling the story. I think it's so powerful. And draws it back to what are the different perspectives, and that sometimes it's not as easy to say what's right and what's wrong, what's the way to go, because we don't know the counterfactual anyway.
It's so complicated. No, it's complex. And we cannot know how this thing that's happened might somehow influence the future. And our interpretation can actually help shape it, right? If you see something and you say, oh, that's a negative thing, it's bad, it's a failure, and then you sit there and you carry that burden around with you, and then it affects your mood and your attitude, of course, you're going to be creating this self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you say, maybe this terrible disaster is a door opening to a new future, and I need to look for that door and walk through it and create and squeeze the lemonade out of these lemons. I know it's hard.
It's hard, and maybe it's not. Recently, I came across this idea, and I found it fascinating that usually we understand the confirmation bias as something negative, that we refer to the confirmation bias when we're in our filter bubble. But actually, what if we used it for the positive, to reaffirm our own abilities, to see possibilities, to see the confirmation for the silver lining of so-called negative outcomes or problems?
Yes, I do a little experiment that I really like. Even you can do this virtually. You tell people, stand up, go look around your room, turn around full 360 degrees and look back at me. All right, how many things did you see that were orange? Just pick a color, right? And people will be like 0, 1. And then you say, all right, now do the same thing and look for orange. Oh, they find 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You see what you're looking for. And if you have glasses that are always looking for how life sucks and it's not working, that's what you're going to see. And if you have glasses that look for what's possible, what seems impossible, what might make impossible possible, and what does this crap make possible, that wasn't possible without this setback, you're going to find it. Yeah. I'm sorry to say, optimism is a strategy.
Yes. Yes. Amen to that. And so often we're just standing in our own way. And I think that's the superpower of a facilitator is we help individuals or groups to get out of their own way. So why don't we look for confirmation of how smart we are, right? We see confirmation about all of our mistakes when we don't feel kind of pretty in our dress. We have the impression that everyone looks at us and sees how our shoes don't fit with our pants, right? But if we would look for all these people who are full of admiration for our intelligence, for our beauty, we would find the same thing, right?
I do honestly think we spend so much of our time comparing our insides to everyone else's outside. We're guaranteed to always come up short. Yes. And it's so hard for us to have an outside perspective on ourselves. That's partly why we need colleagues, friends, right? Coworkers, so we can see ourselves from another perspective.
Yeah. And then we need the space as well where we actually get the candid reflection.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So first, let me just say that for the outside perspective, sometimes you can even do it for yourself. Mm. Like I get people to talk about themselves in the third person, as if you're their best friend, right? Oh, Kimberly has struggled a lot emotionally through the pandemic. She's very sensitive. She's very feeling, and she feels the pain of the whole world. And you know what? That has served very well in igniting in her compassion and a commitment to make a positive difference to our world. Now, that's what I'm talking about myself. It feels so different when you talk about it. Third person, positive, powerful. You want to try it?
When the pandemic started for Miriam, she felt so much anxiety and pity for herself because she lost all of her clients. And then one day she woke up and thought, okay, what can I do differently? So she just imagined that she won the lottery.
Brilliant.
And then she just acted as if she won the lottery and had nothing to lose and nothing to win, but only joy to reach. And this was an entire game changer to Miriam.
Oh, beautiful. And you've mentioned this acting as if. This is so powerful. If you wait until you feel confident, you will never take action. You act as if with a clear commitment, and confidence will come later, but no confidence is required to achieve these great things.
Hey, since you are listening to this podcast, I was wondering whether you get enough opportunities to exchange, practice, and experiment with other facilitators. Have you heard of the Never Done Before Facilitation Festival? It's a 24-hour global event that is co-created by its participants and delivered by some of the most popular Workshops Work podcast guests. Visit neverdonebefore.org for more information. Use the code WORKSHOPSWORK to get a 20% discount. The festival starts as soon as you join. Now, back to the show.
And then it relates to what you pointed out beforehand is to use the obvious negative, the perceived negative as a fuel, maybe. So how can you use it for the better? And how can you just change the perspective and change the narrative?
Yeah, I think it's about telling ourselves a different story. I mean, I have a background with some real challenges in my past that from time to time I feel like, oh, what a helpless victim, poor Kimberly, whatever. And when I can reframe that, I mean, I actually wrote a letter to one of the people that I think really abused me. I wrote them and said, thank you so much. It has really made me into this incredibly strong and powerful person. And if without the challenges of being in your life, I would have never come to be this person that I am, who I love. And I'm thoroughly enjoying the work I'm doing. And I could have never done this work without this trauma. I never mailed the letter, but I wrote it.
Wonderful. And there's no need to really send it, right? But just to feel it, I think it's, wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's about getting out of the helpless victim mode and recognizing that it's up to us to interpret what happens to us and then to reframe it and then to go into a positive direction. What can we do? I mean, there's 1 billion people on planet Earth right now, Miriam, who would gladly exchange lives with ours.
Yes. And I think that's something we can also learn from physics, especially from quantum physics, right? As you said initially, we don't know what reality actually is anyway. So, and your reality is clearly totally different from my reality just because we interpret the present through our lens from the past. So if we are living in different realities anyway, why don't we just make it the best reality we could possibly live in?
Yeah, one of my mentors said, reality is nothing more than a collective hunch. It is up to you to interpret the very few facts that there are, to interpret them to your advantage so they serve you.
And what makes it so difficult for us to follow through? Because it feels, when I say it, I feel it. And in the audience, there must be someone who thinks, oh, wow, I wish I had that state of mind and I would be able to do it just like Miriam does it. Okay, can I reassure everyone who listens to that? I'm not having the state of mind every day. Yes. I also wake up totally anxious and I see everyone's reality and I lose my own.
Yes. I think it's important to acknowledge our frailty, our vulnerability, so that other people can say, oh, it looks like Miriam has her act together and she's just amazing and so powerful and competent and capable. And to also know, and she has these moments. And so you can be a person with these moments, these frailties, these anxieties, and you can still be great. You don't have to be completely 100% great to be amazing in your life. In fact, the frailties and vulnerabilities can contribute to your ability to do wonderful things.
Because they point us in the directions, right? It's through our fears that we realize that we care, is through the negatives and the restrictions that we get creative.
Yes. Let me just share a perspective shifting exercise. Now, if people are just listening to this, they won't see it, but just pick up anything. And I love to pick up things like this rubber chicken and just release it. So just release it and you pick up anything and just release it. And what happens? It falls. And what causes it to fall?
Physics.
Yeah, many people think it's gravity. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a physicist. And I'm not going to waste 1 nanosecond trying to change the gravitational constant of the universe. So I look for other things. How did I contribute to this? Oh, I let it go. And maybe rather than focusing on the things I cannot change, I will focus on what did I contribute to this situation and how might I contribute to shifting this in a better, more positive direction or transforming it.
Love it. True, because if it was, for me, it was a pen. For you, it was a rubber duck. If it was a feather, it would fall in a different way. So yes, we can impact things from falling down in the way they do fall or don't, or whether they hit the ground or not.
Oh, I love that. That's something I hadn't thought of. And when we're talking about falling, for example, sometimes we cannot wait for confidence to proceed. I call it dive off the cliff. And while you're falling, screaming, maybe anxious, you grow wings and you learn to fly. And that is how many great things begin. Like when you imagined you won the lottery, great, just do it. Just start. Don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait to win the lottery. Start, jump off the cliff, and you will either learn to fly or you will invent water that you can land in.
Quick anecdote. So podcast episode number 1, I told everyone that I'm going to start a podcast. I reached out to my longtime mentor who agreed to be my first guest. We scheduled the recording. I wrote down some questions, said everything ready. And then 2 hours before the recording, I realized that I didn't have a microphone. I didn't even know how to record this. So I did a Google search. Okay, you can just use a USB microphone and plug it in. I called my friend. By any chance, do you have a USB microphone?
So you make this commitment and you just start, and somehow you find a way. And maybe it's a prototype, maybe it's an experiment, maybe it's a complete failure, but failure means first attempt in learning.
Yes. And since we're already talking about failure, I always ask the question, what makes a workshop fail?
Yes, I have been in them. I can't stand it. Having some really super smart person who wants to come and train us on what they know. And we sit there, just listening. And I've been in these workshops by these extremely brilliant, highly paid, expensive people. And I think, you know what? I could have read your book or watched your video. If you can replace a workshop with reading a book or watching a video, you don't need to go to the workshop. The only reason, amen, let's say amen together. Because I tell people, I am here as an excuse for you all to come together and interact, learn, and grow. Your company brings me in so that you have some reason why you all get in the same room and interact in meaningful ways that can transform you, your team, your organization, and our world.
Thank you. I just love how you phrased that. You being the excuse for the group to have conversations and to actually interact with their own wisdom and knowledge. And yeah, this points at so many of the superpowers of a facilitator is like holding the space, extracting the wisdom from the group, and actually being the lazy facilitator. That the less you do, the more you impact, depending on how you hold the space.
Absolutely. When I first started teaching these kinds of workshops, I would get so stressed out. I'd be so nervous. And I thought I had to do this or that or bring this or make that happen. And then when I started to realize the less I did, the more valuable the experience was, it was quite humbling. Then instead of being nervous before a workshop, which I'm still nervous, I'm not nervous for myself. My concern is, will they bring the magic? And will we be able to co-create a space together where that magic can emerge?
Yeah. And I'm still curious about what it is that makes it possible for a facilitator to show up and not do and still make things happen. Because in the other extreme, the thought experiment, and we're talking about Dunning-Kruger before we hit the record button, right? So let's imagine this person who doesn't know they read one facilitation book and they read, okay, the best facilitator doesn't do anything. So they come in and they decide not to do anything because the group has it all.
Well, I wouldn't say not doing anything. I would say there's a lot that the facilitator can do before, during, and after. It doesn't look like the typical leading from the front of the room, though. For example, before I would have a meaningful workshop for real transformational change, I would invite, not require, but invite each person to set up a one-on-one discussion with me. And then I would ask them, oh, have you seen the purpose of this program? Yes. What do you think is working that will support us? What's not working? What's missing? If anything were possible, what must happen? What must not happen? Anything else? And just kind of get them thinking and interacting. Otherwise, they show up and go, what's this workshop about? So beforehand, the preparation is key to invite that. Plus, you get ideas from them. Now, if there are people that are challenging personalities and they've been invited to talk with you and give you their ideas and they haven't, then they have no right to stand up and make a nuisance of themselves in the workshop. So it can help deal with those kinds of challenges. Then during the workshop, the first thing people come in, there's rubber chickens on the table. There are koosh balls. There are all kinds of so-called toys and other kinds of things decorating the room. And people have got to start looking at it and saying, what is this place where I've landed? And so the decorations of the room help create a certain shift mentally. And I'm sure you know the name for that cognitive distortion. Also, enclothed cognition. I wear bright colors. I wear innovation socks. And when people come in and they're wearing black, brown, gray, blue, and white, and I'm wearing more playful, creative colors, I say, you can wear a tie only if it's around your head. So I start to give them permission to be more playful. And then I challenge them, next workshop, I challenge you to wear something that's not black, brown, gray, blue, and white. And they're like, why? Why do we have to, Kimberly? Oh, you don't have to, but there is science behind it. It's called enclothed cognition. And research has proven that the way we dress changes how we think and feel and changes how other people think and feel about us. For example, they did an experiment. They gave these people these white coats and told them, this is a lab coat of a scientist. And they had them do mathematical calculations. And then they gave people the same coat and told them, this is a painter's coat to protect them from getting paint on them. People who were told they were wearing a scientist's coat scored better on the math problems.
Yes. And it's also about thank you so much for bringing that up. I feel so. And for everyone listening to the podcast, jump over to YouTube to watch the video and see Kimberly changing all of her dresses. That's amazing. I was fascinated about reading research that even being primed on your own identity. So they were looking at outcomes of female Asian students, how they scored on a math test, and whether they primed the identity of being a female or being primed as being Asian. So being female, they scored significantly less. And when they were primed as being Asian as their main identity, they scored significantly better than the average student. Wow.
I believe that. Absolutely. Sure. In fact, that's a great word for it. It's called priming. You're right. I had forgotten that word.
Yes. And I think then relating it to what you just said. So just wearing giving yourself permission to be the creative one, the one who dares to wear a tie around their head, then primes you, okay, I'm the creative one today. I will come up with creative ideas. And so they will.
I work mostly with Japanese companies that are globalizing. So workshops with 10, 20, 30, 50 people from 10 or 15 different countries. And Japan is fairly formal in the business world. Japanese colleagues from my workshops send me pictures of their innovation socks. They'll send me a picture of them presenting at headquarters or sitting at their desks, and all their feet are covered with these amazing, bright, colorful innovation socks in Tokyo, in Osaka. And this is something they said, oh, Kimberly, we are not allowed to wear such things. And I'm like, have you tried it? It's socks, for crying out loud. And if you can't wear colorful socks, perhaps you could wear innovation underwear. And literally in one evening event, one of the people who was there got down on the floor, face down, and pulled his pants slightly down so we could see that he was wearing innovation underwear. In Japan, right? Very formal, very conservative innovation underwear. It's happening.
Awesome. And if someone believes that there is no larger impact of a workshop, here we go.
Absolutely. So in the workshop, I help them understand yeah, I know you think your manager should be here, because the individuals I work with say their managers are the real problem. And the managers say it's the executives who really need the workshop, Kimberly. And the executives whisper, it's the president. And the president's like, yeah, the CEO is the real problem. And the CEO says, well, once the chairman dies, literally, I have called to one of the company's headquarters after the chairman passed away to express my regret. And they said, yes, but now we can make some good changes. Now, people, this is learned helplessness through the whole org chart. And people are waiting for their senior executives to die before they make changes. And I knew that senior executive, and I'm telling you, they would have been heartbroken to think that they were the ones preventing progress and transformational change in their organization. So how dare we? It's up to us to shine that light and to be that example, leading from any chair without position or title, and to inspire, coach, and support these people so-called above you in the hierarchy. The org chart is completely irrelevant when it comes to how we might transform our organizations.
Yes, I totally believe that. And I would be very curious about your perception. What is the one step we can make and to throw your idea or your exercise back, if the impossible was possible? So it seems impossible. How might we?
I'll tell you one thing I did when I was very young and naive in my career. I went to the president of the division, and I was just a lowly individual engineer in manufacturing. I went to the president of the division and I said, I would like to know what your big crazy dream is for the future, and I want to support it. And could you please help me understand how to support you in creating what you're trying to create here in our division? And he actually went to lunch with me and another individual at my same lowly level and shared his dream, shared his vision for the future. And it's so interesting because these people are in these high positions, but it's like being on the mountaintop, right? And you don't really understand what's going on. And one CEO once said famously, the day I was promoted to CEO is the last day anyone told me the truth. So we are denying them access to the insights and information they need. So we have to somehow find a way appropriately and respectfully to do these kind of skip level communications. Now, it would be so much better if they would invite it. Me, I always was willing to take a risk. I don't have kids in college. I didn't have a spouse that didn't work. I didn't have a mortgage I couldn't afford, so I could risk my job. If you're not able to risk your job, it's much harder to be this kind of transformational change agent. So I tell people you really can't be a transformational change agent or leader if you're afraid to lose your job.
Yeah.
But in the workshop, I think what we can do is we can point to a possible future and then help them understand you are contributing to what's happening now, and you can choose to contribute to a new future that is much more what you want. It's up to you. Don't blame gravity. Hold on to the freaking chicken.
Yes, and how can we facilitate the conversation so that we might not risk our job? So for instance, thinking of the CEO, in many cultures, and you pointed the Japanese, the CEO would never ask that question and admit that he's sitting on the mountaintop, or she. Hello, listener. Are you tired of listening to my podcast voice praising our sponsor Session Lab in each episode? I think it's time to pass the mic over to you. So if you are as much of a Session Lab fan and user as I am, please share your experience and praise, and don't be shy of add a sentence of self-promo. Send me your soundbite and you might hear yourself on the next show and find your name and URL in the show notes. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.